The late afternoon sun was pouring through the tall windows of his parents' living room, casting everything in that warm, golden light that makes ordinary things look like they belong in a movie. 63 people, cousins, aunts, co-workers, neighbors, I'd met exactly twice, were arranged across rented chairs and borrowed folding tables, glasses of champagne in hand, laughing at something my boyfriend's father had just said at the microphone. The backyard of that house in Naperville had been strung with fairy lights. There were flowers I'd helped pick out on a Thursday evening 3 weeks earlier, standing in a wholesale shop with my boyfriend's older sister, genuinely believing I was building something with this family. That we were building something together. It was supposed to be the most romantic evening of my life. It was our engagement party. I need to back up, because none of what happened that night makes sense without the full picture. And I've learned over the past year that the full picture is the only thing that matters. My name is Sarah. I'm 31 years old. I've been a UX designer at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago for 6 years, and I'm good at what I do. I make a solid income. I've always been careful with money. Not obsessive, just intentional. My parents didn't have much when I was growing up, so I learned early that financial stability isn't something that just happens to you. You build it, brick by brick, and you protect it. I met my boyfriend 3 years ago at a mutual friend's housewarming. He was charming, funny, attentive in a way that felt rare. His name is irrelevant now, so I'll just call him my boyfriend. Or, depending on where we are in this story, my ex. He worked in sales. He was good at his job too, but his income was inconsistent. Commission-based, feast or famine. He was upfront about that from the beginning, and I respected the honesty. We moved fast, the way people do when they're certain. By the second year, we were talking about buying a home. Chicago was expensive. Naperville, where his family lived, was more manageable. He wanted to be close to his parents. I didn't think much of it at the time. Here's what the finances look like. I had $97,000 saved. A combination of years of discipline, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and one very good year at work where I hit every bonus threshold. My boyfriend had $18,000. We talked about it openly. He said he felt embarrassed by the gap. I told him love isn't a spreadsheet. We put both amounts toward the down payment on a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, 20 minutes from his parents. The mortgage was in both our names. Or so I was told. I want to be honest about something. There are signs. There are always signs, and I ignored them the way you ignore a slow leak in the ceiling. It's there, you know it's there, but everything looks mostly fine, so you tell yourself it can wait. His older sister called me the Chicago girl for the first 8 months, even after she knew my name perfectly well. His mother asked me, at our third family dinner, whether I planned to keep working once we were married, in the same casual tone you'd ask someone if they planned to order dessert. I laughed it off. His father once referred to my career as my little job, and my boyfriend, sitting right there, right next to me, said nothing. I told myself these were just generational things, old-fashioned, nothing that actually mattered. I was wrong. It mattered. I just didn't understand yet what kind of family I was walking into. The engagement happened on a Tuesday evening in April in the kitchen of our new house, with nobody else around. He cooked dinner, badly, but with great effort, and got down on one knee between the stove and the kitchen island. It was sweet. It was real. I said yes immediately, and I meant it. The party was planned for 6 weeks later. His mother organized everything. I offered to help and was told gently but firmly that she had it handled. I should have noticed the way she had it handled seemed to extend to every aspect of the event. The guest list, the seating, the schedule, the speeches. I sent her my list of friends I wanted invited. She said she'd add them where there was space. 3 of my closest friends didn't make the cut. The reason given was venue capacity. There were 63 people there and the backyard could have held 100. But again, I told myself it was nothing. She was just excited. She was just a mom who wanted to feel involved. Standing there in that golden light, in a blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. My boyfriend was beside me, his hand on my back, laughing with his cousin. I have a glass of champagne. The flowers looked beautiful. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the beginning. His mother tapped a fork against her glass just after 7 o'clock. The room quieted down the way rooms do when someone who commands authority asks for attention. She had a presence, his mother. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of woman who had clearly been the center of every room she'd ever entered and saw no reason to change that now. She smiled. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about her son, how proud she was, how he'd always had a good heart, how she knew the moment she met me that I was someone special. I felt my cheeks go warm. I squeezed my boyfriend's hand, and then she said she wanted to take a moment, just a brief moment, to share something important with the whole family. She said that in their family, marriage was not just a union of two people, it was a joining of households. She said that her family had traditions, expectations, a certain way of doing things that had kept them strong for generations. She said she was sure I would come to understand and appreciate these things in time, but that it was important to lay them out clearly so that everyone was on the same page from the beginning. Then she started listing them. She said that Sunday dinners at their house were not optional, that as the newest daughter of the family, I would be expected to arrive by noon to help prepare the meal and to stay until cleanup was finished. She said that family finances, she used the phrase the family's financial well-being, would benefit from my professional skills, and that she expected me to take over the bookkeeping for both his parents' household accounts and the small rental property his father managed. She said this was simply what the women in their family did, what his aunts had always done, and that it would help me feel connected and useful. She said that my job, and here she paused as if choosing her words was a lovely thing to have, but that once we started a family, priorities would naturally shift. She said she hoped I understood. The room was still, not the comfortable still of people listening quietly, the still of people holding their breath. I looked at my boyfriend. He was staring at the floor. I looked around the room. His sister was nodding slowly, the way you nod when you're watching something play out exactly as expected. His aunts were smiling politely. My friends, the two who'd actually made the guest list, were looking at me with wide, careful eyes. I set my champagne glass down on the table beside me. I said his mother's name quietly, the way you speak when the room is silent and you know everyone is listening. I said, "Can I ask you something?" She smiled and said, "Of course." I said, "The bookkeeping, the Sunday kitchen work, the household accounting, are these things documented somewhere? Is there a written agreement, or a family handbook, or something the other wives signed when they joined the family?" The smile didn't disappear. But it changed. Something underneath it shifted. She said, "No, of course not. These weren't legal documents, they were family traditions. Passed down." "Understood." I nodded. I said, "So they're expectations, personal expectations, not obligations." She said she preferred to think of them as commitments. I said, "The second question is for my boyfriend." He looked up. I said, "What exactly is my role in this marriage?" "Not in your family's definition, yours. What do you see when you picture our life together?" The silence that followed lasted approximately 7 seconds. I counted them. He opened his mouth once and closed it. He looked at his mother. He looked back at me. He said he didn't think this was really the time or place to get into all of this. I said, "You're right, it isn't." I picked up my clutch from the table. I walked to the back door, through the kitchen, past the catered appetizers and the ice sculpture I'd been told was a family tradition, and I sat down on the back porch step by myself for 4 minutes while 63 people stood in his parents' living room deciding what to do. My boyfriend came out 6 minutes later. He sat down beside me. He said his mother meant well. He said she was from a different generation. He said these things weren't really requirements, just preferences, and that we didn't have to follow all of them, and that I was being a little sensitive given that this was supposed to be a happy night. I asked him if he had known his mother was going to say those things. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he'd known she was going to say something, but he didn't know exactly what. I said, "You knew she was going to say something and you didn't warn me." He said he didn't want to worry me beforehand. I said, "Or you agreed with her." He said that wasn't fair. I went home that night to our house, the house I had put $97,000 into, the house where my name was on the mortgage, And I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours thinking about 7 seconds of silence. 7 seconds. That's how long it took to show me exactly who I was dealing with. I called my best friend at 11:30. She's been my best friend since college. She's an attorney now, and she answered on the second ring because she'd been waiting for me to call since my other friend had texted her from the party during the speech. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. When did you last look at the mortgage documents?" I told her I had signed them at closing 8 months ago and hadn't looked at them since. She told me to find them. I dug through the filing cabinet in our second bedroom, which my boyfriend used as a home office, at midnight. I found the folder. I pulled out the closing documents. My best friend stayed on the phone while I read through them. There it was in the ownership section. The title on the house. His name. And his father's name. Not mine. My hands went cold. I read it 3 more times. My best friend asked me what I was seeing. I read it to her out loud. She said, "Sarah, do not say anything to him tonight. Don't fight, don't confront, don't let him know you found this." "Can you do that?" I said yes. She said, "Good. Call me tomorrow morning at 8. We're going to fix this." I want to explain what it felt like to lie down in that bed next to someone you love and feel like the floor had been removed from underneath the entire world. I had given them $97,000. I had given them my name, my trust, my future, and somewhere between the closing table and the engagement party, someone, his father, his mother, his family's lawyer, him, had quietly ensured that the one piece of paper that mattered most had my name nowhere on it. He came home around 1 in the morning. I was in bed, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. He didn't wake me. I met my best friend the next morning at a coffee shop 3 miles from the house. She had already talked to 2 colleagues. She had the mortgage documents pulled up on her laptop. She walked me through everything slowly and carefully. The deed transfer had happened 6 weeks after closing, 2 weeks before he proposed. Someone had filed paperwork with the county to add his father to the title and simultaneously remove me. It had been done quietly through a secondary filing, the kind of thing that's easy to miss if you're not specifically looking for it. She told me I had options, real ones. She told me that the down payment I'd contributed was documented, the wire transfer, the bank statements, everything. She told me that we could pursue this through civil court and that the probability of recovering my financial contribution was high. She told me to start being careful. I asked her what that meant. She said, "Don't close any joint accounts, don't transfer any money, don't sign anything. And if anyone in his family contacts you about the house, about finances, about anything, record it." I bought a recording app that afternoon. The confrontation I expected from my boyfriend didn't come. Instead, what came was a week of careful normalcy. He acted as though the party had never happened. He brought home takeout. He asked about my workday. He acted like a man who was waiting to see which direction I would move. His older sister called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered what my best friend had said. I answered and I pressed record. His sister was smooth. She said she wanted to clear the air. She said she hoped I hadn't taken their mother's speech the wrong way, that it had come from a place of love, that their family simply had high expectations of the people who became part of it. I said I understood. I let her talk. And then near the end of the call, she said something that she probably thought was a warning, but was actually a gift. She said she knew that my job had some instability lately. She'd heard the tech sector was going through layoffs. She said she hoped everything was fine with my position. She said that given the current housing market, it would be a complicated situation if, hypothetically, there were any changes to my income situation, and that the house would need to be handled carefully in that case, and that they just wanted to make sure the family's interests were protected. I said, "I appreciate your concern." She said, "We just want what's best for everyone." I said, "Of course." I stopped the recording. I sent it to my best friend within 4 minutes. She called me back within 6. She said, That's leverage. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything. Every bank statement, every wire transfer, the original down payment records, text messages from my boyfriend discussing the purchase and explicitly acknowledging my $97,000 contribution, emails, a conversation we'd had over text about whose money was going where. I also, and this was my best friend's idea, quietly opened a new personal bank account at a different institution and began moving my own money into it. Nothing from our joint account. Only my own paycheck, my own funds. Careful and clean. I ended the engagement on a Saturday morning. I had asked him to sit down at the kitchen table. He thought we were going to finally talk about the party. He had his coffee. He looked like a man who had prepared himself to manage a difficult conversation. I put a folder on the table. I said, I know about the title change. He looked at the folder. He didn't touch it. I said, I know your father was added to the deed 6 weeks after closing and that my name was removed. I know when it happened, and I have documentation showing that $97,000 of the down payment came directly from my account. He started to say something. I said, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you that I have an attorney, I have documentation, and I have a recorded phone call from your sister that my attorney describes as relevant. I'm giving your family one opportunity to handle this correctly and privately before we handle it through the courts. He said this wasn't what it looked like. I said, then what does it look like? He said his father had just been added to help with the financing, that it was temporary, that he'd planned to fix it after the wedding. I said, after the wedding, when I would have been your wife and significantly less able to walk away. He was quiet. I said, I'm not marrying you. I moved out of the house over the following week, staying with my best friend in the meantime. His family's attorney contacted my best friend's firm on day 4. There was apparently significant concern about the recorded phone call. My best friend described the negotiation as efficient. His father was removed from the deed within 11 days. A settlement was reached within 3 weeks. I won't share the exact number, but I will tell you that I walked away with more than I came in with when you account for the documented expenses I had contributed to the property during the 8 months I lived there. I left with my money, my name off their deed, and my future intact. The Sunday after the settlement was finalized, I was at my best friend's dining table, eating lunch, when my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then kept going. I turned it over. 41 texts, 12 missed calls. Most of them were from his mother. I set the phone face down on the table and poured myself more coffee. My best friend raised an eyebrow at me from across the table. I said apparently 53 attempts to reach me. She said, are you going to respond? I thought about the engagement party, about the golden light, about 63 people watching me stand at the threshold of a life that had already been quietly designed without my input. About 7 seconds of silence that told me everything. I said, no. I blocked every number from that family that evening. There's something I want to say to anyone who might be watching this and recognizing pieces of their own story in mine. Because if the comments on videos like this have taught me anything, it's that I am not the only one. That there are women everywhere who have handed over money, time, trust, and years to people who were tallying it all up in their favor and waiting to see what else they could take. You do not owe anyone a marriage that costs you yourself. The most important document in any relationship isn't the marriage certificate. It's the one that shows where your money went, whose name is on the deed, and whether someone told you the truth when it mattered. Get the prenup. Keep a separate account. Read every piece of paper before you sign it. And when someone shows you who they are, even if it's at a party with fairy lights and champagne and a room full of people watching, believe them the first time. I'm 31 years old. I have a career I've worked hard for, an apartment I chose myself, and a best friend who answered on the second ring at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I have my savings, which are now more substantial than they were before, and I have the kind of clarity that only comes from having stood in a room where someone tried to rewrite your future in front of 63 witnesses and choosing, very quietly, to walk out the back door. It was the most adult thing I have ever done. Walking away wasn't giving up. It was finally, completely choosing myself. And the 53 missed calls? I like to think of them as the sound of a plan that failed.